Hi, it's Marta from SubQuery. Welcome in another lesson, lesson number 5. In this lesson, we will spend some time discussing different entity relationships in SubQuery and then changing our project. So let's jump in. So relationships are connections between different GraphQL entities, and they are represented as relationships between tables in database. Every entity is a reflection of a table in database, and relationships are relations between those tables. SubQuery supports one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many relationships, and we will adjust our project in order to add many-to-many relationship. To do that, we need to update transaction entity and we will create a new account entity. We will regenerate associated TypeScript with yarn codegen as always, and we will update mapping handlers file accordingly. But before we start changing our project, let's do a little quick recap of what we have accomplished in a previous lesson. So the whole lesson was dedicated to data mutation example. We updated our collator in order to allow it to store information about the leave date. We needed to add property collator left to collator entity, and we of course regenerated associated TypeScript with yarn codegen and updated all other files accordingly. And now let's spend some time discussing different data relationships. The first relationship I want to discuss is one-to-one relationship. But before we discuss this one, let's look on relationship from the higher level. So it's rather normal that in more complex projects you will have some relationship in database. An entity can often have some nested relationship with other entities within it. You can define a relationship by using a name of other entity as a value of a field in another entity. So in this case, for example, if we look at the person and passport, we exactly see this relationship established here when we used person name, entity name, as the field value within a passport entity. One-to-one relationships work only when there is one entity mapped to another. And here we have a perfect example. So one person can only have one passport, and one passport can only belong to one person. There is no other option. So this is a perfect example of one-to-one relationship. Okay, this is yet another relationship type, one-to-many, when there is a relation between one entity to many entities. And you can use square brackets, like in this example here with account, to suggest, to indicate that there are multiple entities linked here. And the perfect natural example is that one person has multiple accounts, and each account can only belong to one person. And here we can also have a quick look at reverse lookups. This is something we highly recommend to add to your project whenever you can. Adding the rift from annotation creates a virtual field that allows you to query this data without changing database structure. Many-to-many relationship, quite interesting situation. Let's start with looking at the first example, the one on the left. Many-to-many relationship can be achieved by implementing one entity that sort of links to the rest of the entities. So within person group, we have person and group entities relationship established with entity person and entity group. So person group is actually mapping entity that connects two other entities, person and group. And now let's take a look at example on the right side, account and transfer. It is also possible to establish connection to the same entity in multiple fields of certain entity. So in this case, when we look, for example, at transfer, we see field from and field to, and in both situations we have a connection to account entity, because that's true. Transfer can have is related to account in terms of from which account it comes and to which account it goes. So this situation established a bidirectional relationship between account from and account to through transfer table. And actually pretty similar example of many-to-many relationship we will add to our project. So let's jump in. And here we are back in our project. And the interesting thing about this lesson is that this is the first time we won't change project YAML. So we will use exactly the same handler, handleFrontierEvmEvent, and that's what we need. So there is no reason to change anything. So let's close the file and let's jump to schema GraphQL because this is the file where we spent a lot of time today. First of all, let's clean it a little bit so we don't need all of those empty lines. Okay, so we have transaction approver and collator, and we are missing one entity. It's account. So we will add a brand new one. Let's add it here. So we created it. It has only one property, key ID, and now we will link those two. And to link two entities, we need to use the name of one entity in the field value. So instead of a string, we will have now account. So this is the first step. And let's just comment it as a foreign key, because this is this points to a different entity and is a foreign key field. So we established a relation between those two entities. Transaction comes from certain account and goes to certain account. So that's one part of the picture. And now we can do more about account. So account can be linked as well with transactions. So we can set multiple transaction as sent transaction to account, and the same with received transactions. And also, as discussed previously, in this example, it's quite useful to use reverse lookups to be able to create this virtual field and be able to query this data to access either the data related with the field from in transaction or field to in transaction. So if we are talking about optimization, let's spend some time on index annotation. So to improve query performance, we strongly suggest to add index annotation for every field which is a non-primary key field and it's not JSON object. So how to use it? It's quite simple. You just need to add index annotation like this one for every field that you plan to sort by or filter by. And also, if you know that certain field value will be unique, you can use annotation with unique set to true. And that's it. Let me just update whole schema GraphQL file. Okay, so that's it. We've updated the file, and next step would be to go to mapping handlers file to accommodate all the changes. Well, for sure we need to create account, so we need to take care of this part. Okay, let's jump in. Okay, here we are in mapping handlers file, and because we are changing the transaction, this is the only part of the file that actually is of interest for us right now. So let's remove this function and add a variation of it. Okay, so let's regenerate associated TypeScript. Let's bring terminal. And let's regenerate it. Right, and then let's add account. Okay, and let's have a look at this function. So first of all, we get the data from the event related with from and to address. And then we are making sure that certain account actually exists. Account related with from address and account related with to address. If there is no such account, we will create account, because transaction has to be related with existing accounts. So this part ensures that we are actually having proper accounts in our database, and only then we create a new transaction entity and save it in the database. That's it. That's how simple it was. And the next step would be to, because we already regenerated associated TypeScript, we need to run yarn build, and we need to remove data folder, clean up Docker, and run indexer from the beginning to make sure that all the data is indexed properly. So let's do this. Let's bring terminal. Let's run yarn build. We can also remove data and actually clean Docker to make sure that everything will be cleaned and ready for indexer to be set from the beginning. And then we can run Docker. Why we are doing it? Because we applied a lot of changes to the project, and we want indexer to run from the beginning, from the starter block. So we'll make sure that we have all the data and it's reindexed properly. So this is why we are doing it. It can take a while, so I will see you once it's done, and then we will jump to our playground, GraphQL playground as always, and we'll see the result of the query. Okay, so here we are. The Docker is up and running. So I already jumped into our GraphQL playground. As you can see, there is query already waiting for us. I adjusted it a little bit to accommodate the changes and to reflect relationships in our project. And let's press play button and see the data. For approvals, we still need to wait a little bit, as always, because it takes some time to index it for this project when we are reindexing from beginning. And yes, here are our accounts and set of transactions related with a certain account. Perfect. That's it. We managed to finish another lesson, discuss data relationships, and even implement it in our project and query some data. Awesome. So what happened in this lesson? A lot. We've created many-to-many relationship. We updated transaction entity and created account entity. We used foreign keys to link those entities. We talked about index annotation and derived from annotation. We regenerated associated TypeScript with yarn codegen as always, and we updated mapping handlers file accordingly to accommodate all the changes. We needed to apply some changes to handleFrontierEvmEvent function in this file. So that's it. We finished another lesson. I hope you had a lot of fun changing your project, and I see you in lesson 6. Bye.